So hi everyone, I am Bianca Miller-Cole, founder and director of the B Group and Bianca Miller London, and author of Self-Made. And I guess fundamentally I'm an entrepreneur, but I'm also a firm believer in the importance of personal development, whether that's for entrepreneurial reasons or whether that's for securing your own personal brand to, get your career to where you want it to be. So I'm very passionate about people and really helping them to find their passion.
That sounds wonderful. It sounds like a good way to spend your life working with people and kind of making them the best that they can be. So, how did you come to do the job that you do now?
So I was always quite entrepreneurial, even as a child, but I kind of followed the educational route that I guess was kind of expected of me, and is kind of what I guess the kind of world preaches you should do. So I went to university. I did a degree in business management and economics, and then left and went to the city where I was HR advisor at a corporate organisation, a company called Accenture, who's like a management consultancy. And I was HR advisor basically to their graduate group. And they had the kind of best graduates academically. They were very smart, very savvy, but weren't always very good at kind of personal branding. So communicating, networking, dressing appropriately, and so on. And so I got asked to help with that. So I started an initiative called Preparing for Promotion, helping them with those things. And that's kind of what led me to start my first business. And then I went into recruitment very briefly and realized it wasn't just a graduate problem. There were people of all ages who just weren't able to understand the importance and impact of personal branding. So that's when I started my first business. It really was one of those kind of old-fashioned light bulb moments where you think, gosh, just the graduates. Lots of people out there who don't have good CVs or can't communicate well in interviews or don't realise that what they say online is part of their brand. And, a funny thing you think is funny on Twitter is not so funny to future employers. All of those things. And also just meeting people who, I don't know if they felt like their dreams or their vision was stifled, but they just didn't know what they wanted. They just hadn't worked out where they wanted to go. And I think in any scenario when you're, if you're going to visit somewhere, you would go with a map. And I think people don't always do that with their own career. And that's what I wanted to help people to do.
It's really cool. It's really interesting. I think it's. I'm really fascinated in brand as a whole. So the whole idea of sort of personal brand, I think, for me, has become something that's kind of changed for me. I am still the same person, but actually the way I have to kind of package what I do is different. And actually, if you're wise to that and you're savvy to it, you can actually benefit yourself, but also benefit others and give a stronger message, a clearer message in the work that you're doing. Why is personal brand and identity so important to you?
Because of literally what packaging. I think people, if you're working in an organisation, you're always working on how the organisation is packaged. What does it look like from the outside perspective? How do we engage customers? How do we get people buying our product or service? Like, people think about that on a daily basis if they work for an organisation or a charity or a school, whatever they're thinking about. They're always concentrating on the outward impression. However, people don't seem to think that they need to do that for themselves. Like, so much of their time is spent working on the business brand, and they don't realize the importance of that personal brand. And the reason why I think it's important is because realistically, on a day-to-day basis, what people buy is not necessarily the business brand. That might get them through the door, but they buy the personal brand. They buy that person and the relationships that they form with that person. So regardless of what what the company does, if you as an individual are representing that company and you are not knowledgeable, or you're not personal, or you don't understand the customer's needs, you don't adapt to them or that environment, or you're not able to just showcase why you're so amazing, I think that is what a lot of people are missing. For me, that's why personal identity is so important. So, like, for example, Emma, when we first met, you were so amazing because you just had this amazing personality, and it just shone through. And it wasn't about your disability; it was about you. Like, I remember you wearing like the sparkly dress, and you were like, this sparkly dress is so that everyone can see me sparkle. And it's that sparkle. Like, not enough people realize that they all have a sparkle, right? And it's how you market and how you talk about that sparkle that changes the perception that people have of you, and also opens doors and opportunities, and gets more people thinking, wow, I could be like that, or I could do that. And I think without knowing your sparkle, it's very hard to really get ahead or accept as much as you should.
So how do you help people find their sparkle?
So a lot of it is about, firstly, I think, a lot of the work I do is group work, unfortunately, depending how you look at it. So so I end up, my first kind of interaction with people was actually telling them what a personal brand is. That's always kind of the first thing. So really identifying what a personal brand is, how it impacts them, getting them to understand the various parts of personal branding. So, for example, your presentation, how you present yourself, how you communicate, how you utilize your knowledge and skill set, how you operate online and how that impacts your online brand, how you are face to face, and how that impacts how people think about you when they meet you, the 7 seconds to make a first impression. Like, I go through all of that to make sure they have a firm understanding of what the personal brand is. And then often people go away and they start thinking about what to do to really put themselves out there and make the most of every opportunity. And some of it is just about, it's about defining it. It's about knowledge in the first instance. And then second to that, whether it's a group or it's an individual, I always want people to find their why. Like, there's a fantastic book by Simon Sinek called Why? Anyway, Start with Why, it's called. And it's a great book because it gets people to think about, what's your why? Why are you doing this? Why do you get up every morning and go to work? What is it about that work that makes you really excited? Are you passionate about it? What difference could you make? And I think there's so many questions people need to ask themselves about what they want for their future. We work so many hours, and if it's up to this government, we won't stop working until 70 odd. So you need to make sure you like what you're doing, you feel like it's making an impact, because I think that is what keeps people going long term. So the way I help people to find their sparkle is really to concentrate on what they're passionate about, use that as their calling card, help them to kind of create their personal brand so that they are getting the most of every opportunity, so that they're putting themselves out there in the right way at every interaction.
So my problem I have with personal brand, I think, is I feel like I've always had quite a strong sort of sense of who I am as a person, but then something like Parkinson's comes along and it shoves its nose in, and it tries to make you someone different, and it does that by a number of different things. It tries to kind of change you physically, it tries to change you emotionally, it actually starts to change your personality, it changes the things that you're able to do. I think there's a lot of identity around work, and if you're unable to work anymore, it strips kind of some of that element of your personality away. And I know it's not your main area of expertise, but I just wondered if you had any sort of tips or advice, because ultimately it's about kind of people learning how to kind of find themselves. I wondered if you had any tips around how people could kind of help themselves when they've been forced into a situation where changes have been forced on them.
I think it's interesting because it does change. Like, I did mention a lot of career-based information when I talked about personal branding. That is true. However, I think what's interesting about your journey is that you've utilised the Parkinson's to start to champion other things. So it's not just about work anymore. It's about something that has changed your life, but you're able to utilize that to write a book, to do these podcasts, to encourage people to think more about the impact on yourself and the impact on other people who have a similar situation. And I think sometimes your passion changes. I think there's so many times that, down the road of life, there are diverts, going back to the kind of traveling analogy, sometimes you're going to route, you've been to that route 10,000 times, but suddenly there's a divert and you have to go a different way and you have to find a different way. And I think the same goes for life. There will be times where something will happen that would change what you thought was you being on course, but now you have to think, how can I use this or utilize this, or how do I need to change my focus to make sure that I'm still happy, but that, you know, I now have to take into account these changes. And I think these changes happen for people in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of about now finding maybe a new niche or finding a way around it. So your direction, your end goal may not change, but now you have to change how you get there. And sometimes it's about adapting to that environment, adapting to that change. And I think it's difficult. I think that you're right, it's not my area of expertise. And so I can't comment specifically, but I think a lot of personal growth and development is about understanding and sometimes embracing change and thinking, how can I utilize this change that I had unfortunately I had no decision over, but how can I use this to continue on my path or to make a change somewhere else?
Because I mean, I guess it's something that people go through in various points of life. You know, if you have a baby and you sort of go back to work, or you try and fit back into the life that you had previously, there's going to be kind of gear shifts and changes. And I think a lot of the time, personally, I found that actually not looking back and not trying to fit myself back into that hole that I was, you know, aiming towards has actually been better and easier for me to almost kind of write a different future and to kind of change it, or to, like you said, try and find a different way of getting to the goals that I want to get to. Because if you try and do the same thing, you're going to come up against being frustrated. You're going to struggle. And I think with Parkinson's especially, and with other kind of long-term health conditions, you sort of mourn the death of the old you a little bit. It's quite difficult, and it's something you have to do. You have to almost sort of get over the fact that you are not going to be the same person, but it's about embracing that new person that you're going to become, and making sure you love them, because you're stuck with them for life, you know, and they're going to be the person that you wake up and see in the mirror in the morning, and you have to like them.
Absolutely. And you're right. I mean, I was going to say the baby analogy, but I didn't want to trivialize the situation. But I totally agree with you. I've had so many friends who have had children, have tried to go back to normal life, and it's just not possible, because these are life-changing scenarios, and it's very difficult to just go back. And you're right, you now need to move forward with what is your identity, whether we be that as a mother or a father, or with a life-changing health condition. It's now about saying, okay, this is my new situation. How make this work for me? How can I continue to do what I want to do or what I love, but maybe make some changes and have some adaptations? And I think that's the hard bit. But that's the thing about life, isn't it? You just don't know when something is going to happen or something is going to change. You just kind of have to push on and be able to persevere. And I think perseverance is one of the most important kind of skill sets about life sometimes, you know?
It's weird, actually, when I've been interviewing people for this blog, I've kind of noticed a lot of the time that people have said that it's changed them in a really positive way at times, because they've actually seen what they can cope with. And that's quite an empowering thing, because you always have a sense of what you can handle as a person, but you don't know until you're kind of tested. And I think Parkinson's has a knack of bringing that out of you, and actually some people find that they kind of like the person they've become better because of that. They struggle with who they are and things like that, but they know deep down that they are a strong person. They know they can cope. I think that's something amazing, actually, that comes out of it, that you'd never wish for, but actually you're kind of glad of it. You're glad to know that.
It's like a renewed sense of self, isn't it? Because I think some people are not conscious of who they are and what they can do, and something like this makes you more conscious, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. You become very aware of what you can and can't do, who you are, you know, your limitations and things like that. But actually, when you know your limitations, you're more likely to try and push yourself out of them, I think, sometimes, because especially when you get a bit kind of fighty and, you know, you're stubborn like I am. So I think it's a really sort of interesting kind of element of Parkinson's and long-term health conditions, that kind of shift. But I think there's a lot you can do to kind of embrace the new you, and it will constantly change. I mean, as the years pass, every kind of couple of years, your personality will probably change, you'll become stronger, but you might kind of, the medication is always trying to change the way you are as a person. It's kind of mind-altering medication that can bring on horrible side effects around addiction and kind of things like that. So it's that kind of really just making sure you are trying to like the person that you are and not be too hard on yourself, I think.
Do you find that you, as time goes on, you're less hard on yourself, or do you feel like there are times where you're like trying to push yourself harder to get to where you want to be or go?
I'm harder on myself, definitely. Every day I'm harder on myself, which is ridiculous because every day it gets harder. I sort of say to myself that actually today is like the youngest and the most kind of able I will ever be, and so I need to do it today and get things done. But then I'll still be brutal on myself tomorrow when it comes to trying to do something. So I feel like I'm on kind of limited time that things are going to be easy to do, so I try and do everything and rush things, and I'm very impatient. But I think that will be something that will continue, and I'll probably always be quite tough on myself because I don't want to be someone that sits at home and buys a pair of comfortable slippers and just gives up, you know.
Right, sure. Do you find you're better at delegation now?
Certain things. Boring tasks.
Okay, fine, yeah. Fair enough.
Good at delegating, like,
I think that's something that everyone struggles with. What's that, sorry?
I'll be like, can you hold my handbag, please? I'm better at kind of delegating. I got used to cut my steak up, didn't I? I felt really embarrassed.
Well, you can't, but that's my point. I feel like you have to be willing to ask for help. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, regardless of their health conditions, are not open to asking for help. I think we try and be so independent in life that when something's really hard or you're not sure about something, you have to be willing to ask for help, or you have a person that offers help. And I think not enough people are being, helpful in life.
It's true because I think people are scared to be overly helpful. People don't want to offer help if it's going to embarrass someone. They don't want to upset anyone, so everyone's overcautious. And I think it's almost a case of sort of asking someone and just saying, look, will you tell me if you need help? Which I think is what you did to me, actually. I think if I remember rightly, that's what you said, and you struck it perfectly. You said, I'm not going to automatically help you, but if you want my help, just ask, sort of thing. And then so when I then did need help, I asked you, and you kind of struck it really well. So I think, but a lot of people don't know that's the way to treat people with conditions, and so they'll either kind of bumble in and sort of feel like, everything, people are always meaning well. No one ever means to kind of upset someone, but and they would never know that's how to treat someone. But and you don't get angry with them, but it can make you feel a little bit embarrassed. I think if someone kind of is a bit over the top helpful, and then if someone doesn't help you, it's kind of this is the other extreme. You're just like, God, someone just help me put my coat on.
You don't want to ask. Yeah.
We're here for 5 hours otherwise.
Yeah, exactly.
One sleeve on my coat and the other one hanging off. But yeah, I think we do have to kind of almost lose our pride a little bit, and kind of become more open to talking to people and sharing with people how we're feeling. And I think that's something as well. There's kind of a softness that can come with Parkinson's and other conditions that I've noticed that I connect in a personal way and in a professional way more quickly and probably stronger with people in a kind of, because I think I'm showing my weakness immediately. I'm showing the things that all my kind of flaws and weaknesses and emotions more quickly than anyone else would. So people kind of warm to me quicker, I think. And that definitely works to my advantage in like a networking environment or like even a personal environment, that people can see who I am and there's no show, it's who I am, and that's quite a nice thing about it, to be honest.
Out of interest, from like a personal branding perspective, obviously Parkinson's isn't your identity.
No.
You're Emma, right? So how do you get people to realise that they are, is a condition that you have, but it's not everything that you are? How are you at the moment kind of getting people to realise that?
I find that I make sure that I'm doing lots of other things, so making sure that I'm about those other things and trying not to kind of talk on stages about just Parkinson's. So I've kind of discovered that, I'm very interested in tech, I'm quite interested in business and things like that. So then I will talk to a business crowd about having Parkinson's and actually how it helps, or I'll talk about tech, assistive tech and accessibility and things like that. So it's become more about, this is Emma who's interested in tech and is a businesswoman. She also has Parkinson's.
Happens to have Parkinson's.
Yeah, so it's almost like you have to find the things that make you tick and talk about those with Parkinson's as a kind of a side thing. And it's really difficult to do that. And I've spoken to some other people who've kind of struggled with it, where they've sort of become all about the Parkinson's. And I feel myself getting like that sometimes. And I have to kind of, so like next week is Parkinson's Awareness Week, and I will talk about Parkinson's till the cows come home and be sick of it. But I
Sure.
allow myself to talk about it for that week only, and then after that I have a rest, and I don't mention Parkinson's for the rest of April if I can possibly avoid it. So it never happens like that.
But do you think even with that talk, you could probably lead with, your business mind, your tech mind, and say, "But I also have."
Yeah.
Is that?
That's the way I like it that way round. I like that kind of balance, and I like that people talk to me. Parkinson's second. I mean, I've got a problem at the moment that my neck. I've got a what's the word I'm looking for? Prolapse disc in my neck. So my neck has kind of dropped, which means that I'm having to kind of do things very differently. And kind of personal brand wise, that's really difficult because I can't kind of enter a room and make eye contact, and eye contact is so important, I think. But I'm learning other ways of kind of standing on a stage and connecting with people, which is great because they're things that will stay with me long after this has fixed itself, and I think actually it's kind of been really interesting to learn that. I've not enjoyed it, but it's been interesting to kind of learn that you can connect with an audience. You can, stand-up comedy, you can make an audience laugh without even looking at them, and that's a skill I think I will keep with me because it's very hard to connect with people when you can't use your eyes for it. It's
sure, absolutely, yeah.
You suddenly realise how important it is, and I think it's really important to me that I am more than Parkinson's, but it will always be part of who I am, and it's kind of the thing that got me noticed for being a bit different. It's kind of the thing that makes me a bit different, I think.
Yes, yeah. And that's the thing I think about personal branding. It is about personal identity, but I think it's also about choosing how you want to be identified.
Yes,
I think so many people look at it as you have a personal brand, which you do, and that's it. But it's actually a case of, yes, you have a natural personal brand. Now, what can you do to change how people perceive you or how people identify you? And I really do think you have a choice. And that's why I asked you the question, because I think you are Emma first, and you are all the things you do first, and then you happen to have Parkinson's.
Yeah.
And it's a choice whether you want Parkinson's to be your primary identity or secondary, but people just don't realise that they do have a choice.
That's so true.
I think I want to inspire people to see that their personal brand is personal to them, and it's something that they can create, and it's something that can be changed. So even if they have a current perception that isn't what they want it to be, they can work on changing that. And I think that's an important thing to know.